Today was pretty big in the 2pac murder trial. Keefe told police who shot 2pac, and the jury heard the recording. This is coming directly from Dwayne Keefe D. Davis himself, and his 2008 version of what happened is dramatically different from what he's claiming today. Before we get to that recording, though, prosecutors called Devonta Lee, a former South Side Compton Crips associate, who told the jury that he was friends with Keefe D's nephew, Orlando Baby Lane Anderson. And just like several witnesses that we've already seen in this trial, Lee made it very clear that he did not voluntarily want to be here. He testified pursuant to a court order. Lee discussed his affiliation with the Southside Crips and described Mob Peru as a rival gang associated with Death Row Records, Suge Knight, and Tupac Shakur. When prosecutors asked him about Keefe D, Lee described him as a hustler who was known for hustling. He also discussed the earlier conflict at the Lakewood Mall between people associated with the Southside Crips and Mob Peru. That matters because prosecutors are building a timeline showing that this wasn't just a random encounter in Las Vegas. There had allegedly already been escalating tension between those groups before 2pac and members of the Death Row entourage attacked Orlando Anderson inside of the MGM Grand on September 7th, 1996. He himself was not in Las Vegas that night. He testified that he was incarcerated at this time. Then the defense got its chance to cross-examine him. One thing that stood out enough that a juror actually submitted a question involved money that Lee had received during the investigation. The juror essentially wanted to know why Lee received multiple payments if he only provided information once. Lee explained that the payments occurred during the course of the investigation and said authorities had different ways of helping people who were cooperating. That could become important when the defense attacks the credibility and motives of witnesses who provided information to investigators. Then came the biggest part from today. Prosecutors started playing Keefe D's December 2008 police interview. This recording exists because investigators weren't originally sitting down with Keefe D trying to solve 2pac's murder. They were actually investigating the 1997 murder of Christopher Wallace, better known as the Notorious B.I.G. or Biggie. Keefe D had come onto investigators' radar during that investigation. Former LAPD detective Darren Dupree testified yesterday that when Keefe D was asked whether he had anything to do with Biggie's murder, Davis essentially told investigators, no, they didn't do that one. And according to Dupree, that immediately made investigators wonder what he meant by that one. And Keefe D allegedly responded that they did the other one, meaning 2pac. That led to the recorded interview that the jury heard today, and there is a huge legal issue surrounding this recording. At the beginning of the interview, detectives repeatedly assured Keefe D that the conversation was confidential. Jurors actually heard an investigator tell him that nothing he said that day could be used against him. They also heard assurances that what he said wasn't supposed to leave the room. That is exactly why Keefe D's defense fought so hard to keep this interview away from the jury. But prosecutors argue that whatever protection Davis originally had did not give him unlimited immunity to spend years publicly repeating the same story in interviews, documentaries, podcasts, and ultimately his own memoir. So the judge ruled that the recording could be admitted. So almost 18 years after that conversation happened, the jury sat there today and listened to it. Keefe D placed himself inside the white Cadillac. He described being in that car with his nephew Orlando Anderson and the other men prosecutors have connected to the shooting. According to the version Keefe D gave detectives, Orlando had been attacked by 2pac, Suge Knight, and members of their entourage inside the MGM Grand after the Mike Tyson fight. Afterward, Keefe D said that they went looking for 2pac and Suge, and eventually they spotted them. 2pac was riding in the passenger seat of the black BMW being driven by Suge Knight. Keefe D described having the gun while he was sitting in the front of the Cadillac. And this next statement could be extremely damaging for him. Keefe D told detectives that if the BMW had been positioned on his side, he would have fired himself. In his own words, quote, I would have blasted. But because of where the vehicles were positioned, Davis said he passed the gun toward the back seat. According to Davis, DeAndre Big Dre Smith initially had the opportunity to fire, but didn't want to do it. Then Davis said Orlando Anderson took the gun and Orlando started shooting. Again,
hey, what's up? It's the Monster Man, man. This video is crazy, man. Keefe D did that shit. All of these ninjas guilty, and all of them need to get a life sentence for killing 2pac and almost killing Suge, because a lot of people thought that Suge would have died. Suge got a graze in his head, so a lot of people are saying that Diddy is the one that put $1 million in 2pac and Suge Knight head to get them killed. He was so jealous of 2pac and Biggie Smalls' friendship. So this shit been going on so long. And Keefe D, when they asked him about Biggie Smalls' killing, he said that he did not did that one. He did the 2pac killing. So this ninja was rejoicing because he killed a legend. So we had to do something about these ninjas. They're really out of control with some bullshit. So they need to investigate if Diddy got something to do with this shit. I don't know if Keefe D is a real gangster or not, because this ninja be telling he's a rat, he's a snitch. He can't go back to Compton because this ninja was really out of control. You're gonna tell me you and Orlando Anderson, Big Jake, went and got 2pac killed, and you're just gonna talk about it and be doing a lot of interviews? You think that you would have never get indicted? This ninja thought he was untouchable, and then he's gonna snitch and saying that Diddy was the one that organized it, and Eric Von Zip was Diddy's stepdad. So I believe that it's possible that Diddy was involved in the killing and the demise of 2pac Shakur. He was so jealous of this ninja. Diddy always wanted the spotlight, so it's possible that Diddy did that shit. And a lot of people are saying that Diddy is responsible for Biggie Smalls getting killed. Biggie Smalls got sacrificed. Why would you bring Biggie Smalls to a place where you got enemies? And a lot of people were saying that you were the ones that got 2pac out of the way. Why would you risk your number one artist? That is just bullshit to me. You brought him out there that so you could have get him killed, you could have get his publishing and all of his money that he ever worked. So Diddy got a strategy just to make some money. So he sacrificed his number one artist. He and Clive Davis conspired so that they can get Biggie Smalls killed, because he was planning to leave Bad Boy. So a lot of people are saying that 2pac was planning to leave that role. We heard a lot of theories and a lot of conspiracies, but we don't know what is really true. But I know that Keefe D is involved in the demise of 2pac Shakur, and they need to give him a life sentence. This ninja need to get a death penalty. He was really wilding and be talking about this shit like it's a joke. You take away one of the number one rappers in the game and think we're gonna just smile about it? Keefe D should burn in hell. They need to give this ninja at least 35 to life for all of the bullshit that he been doing for this long time. You thought that you were a gangster, you was gonna get away. They need to hold all of these ninjas accountable. And if Diddy got something to do with that shit, he need to get life. He should be back on the street, because this ninja always be doing organized crime. He's an instigator. They need to get him out of the game. And he's a snitch. This ninja been a rat for a long time. Big rat. But it is what it is, man. It's the Monster Mind. Have a blessed day.
This is Keefe D himself telling detectives that the gun he had in the Cadillac was passed into the back seat and that his nephew opened fire on 2pac and Suge. Davis even described the positioning inside the car and how Orlando would have had to shoot across Big Dre. Afterward, Davis said he believed that Suge Knight was dead, but Suge survived. 2pac was struck multiple times and died 6 days later at only 25 years old. And there's something very important about the shooter identification that I think people need to know. Keefe D's version is not the only version prosecutors have been given. Devonta Lee, the witness who testified today, previously told the grand jury something different. Lee previously testified that Orlando Anderson did not have a clear shot and that DeAndre Big Dre Smith was actually the person who fired the weapon. According to that version, Keefe D gave the gun to Orlando gave it to Big Dre, and Big Dre fired. But in Keefe D's 2008 account, it was basically the opposite at the crucial moment. Big Dre didn't want to shoot, Orlando took the gun, and Orlando fired. That's a significant contradiction over one of the biggest questions in this entire case. Who actually pulled the trigger? Legally, prosecutors don't have to prove that Keefe D himself fired a single bullet. Their case is that he organized the retaliation, obtained or controlled the gun, participated in hunting down 2pac and Suge, and supplied the weapon used in the attack. So even if jurors ultimately aren't certain whether Orlando or Big Dre physically pulled the trigger, prosecutors are trying to prove that Keefe D was criminally responsible for setting the entire thing in motion. And then there was another name that came up in the recording: Sean Diddy Combs. This needs a major disclaimer because this is an allegation made by Keefe D. It has not been established as fact, and Combs has long denied any involvement in Tupac's murder. Davis told investigators that Combs had allegedly discussed paying for Tupac and Suge Knight to be killed. Davis alleged the money was supposed to pass through a man named Eric Zip Martin. Investigators later attempted to use Keefe D as a confidential informant to reconnect with Zip in New York and potentially corroborate that story, but it didn't work. The alleged payment was never successfully established through the operation, and Combs has not been charged in connection with Tupac's murder. So the important distinction is this. The jury is hearing that Keefe D made the allegation. They are not being shown proof that the allegation against Combs is true. But all of this creates an absolutely bizarre situation for Keefe D's defense. Because the prosecution's star witness against Keefe D may essentially be Keefe D. Over the years, Davis has given dramatically different accounts. In earlier FBI interviews, he denied involvement in Tupac's murder and denied that Orlando was responsible. Then in 2008, he described being in the Cadillac, having the gun, and Orlando shooting Tupac. He later publicly discussed the killing repeatedly and released the memoir Compton Street Legend. And now, right before this trial, Keefe D told Fox 5 that he wasn't even in Las Vegas when Tupac was killed. He says the stories were essentially made for money, that a ghostwriter wrote the book, and that people should not treat those statements as truthful admissions. Which means his defense is now asking the jury to believe something extremely unusual. Do not believe what my own client spent years saying about himself. The defense does have a real argument they are trying to build around that. They continue emphasizing that after nearly 30 years, prosecutors do not have the murder weapon, forensic evidence tying Keefe D to the Cadillac, or an independent eyewitness who can simply point at him and say, "I saw him inside the car." The position is that Keefe D exaggerated or fabricated these stories for money and notoriety, and investigators built a murder prosecution around the words of a man they themselves knew was capable of lying. The state is arguing the opposite. They are essentially telling jurors that there is a reason Davis knew such specific details, because he was there. And today was different from hearing about his book or watching some random internet interview. The jury actually heard the recording of Keefe D talking directly to investigators in 2008, years before he was ever charged with Tupac Shakur's murder. Court is scheduled to resume tomorrow at 9 a.m. Las Vegas time.